I'm investigating the story of a legendary train full of Nazi gold, and its mystery cargo simply vanished from the face of the earth.
A train heads toward WWII and it disappears.
Right now, beneath the forests of Poland, there's a train that's been missing for 80 years. In 2015, two treasure hunters claimed they found it. The Polish government was 99% sure. Armed guards surrounded the site. The world watched as excavators dug deeper and deeper. But when they finally broke through that sealed chamber, something made them stop cold. Not because of gold, not because of treasure, because of what shouldn't have been there. And suddenly, officials shut everything down. No photos released, no interviews allowed. Workers started disappearing from the project. Even Fox News questioned why the silence. What was inside that train that turned this treasure hunt into something no one wants to talk about? By the end of this video, you'll understand why some secrets were buried for a reason. Picture the winter of January 1945. Germany is collapsing under the weight of the Soviet advance. The Red Army is pushing west at a terrifying pace. Cities are being evacuated in panic. Officials are burning documents, destroying evidence, trying desperately to hide what they've done. And in that chaos, near the city of Breslau, what we now call Wrocław in Poland, something strange is happening. Locals spot a train unlike anything they've seen before. This thing is heavily armored, bristling with guards who won't let anyone approach. The stories passed down through generations describe crates being loaded under heavy security. Hundreds of them, all marked with official insignia. Some witnesses claim they caught glimpses of gold through cracked boxes. Others mention wrapped paintings, jewelry, valuables that clearly don't belong on a military transport. The train's destination? The Owl Mountains, a remote, heavily forested region most people actively avoid. And then, as if swallowed by the earth itself, it vanishes. No records of arrival, no documentation, no survivors, just an eerie silence that would stretch across decades. Ordinarily, this sounds like every other wartime legend, right? For years, that's exactly what most serious historians believed. Just another myth born from chaos. But then you look closer at where this train supposedly disappeared. The Owl Mountains weren't just empty wilderness. They were home to something called Project WWII. Between 1943 and 1945, forced laborers from concentration camps were worked to death, carving out over 8 kilometers of underground tunnels into these mountains. Massive chambers, secret facilities, construction on a scale that defies imagination. Thousands died during construction. But here's what makes it even more unsettling. Many of these tunnels were never finished. Some were sealed up mid-construction without explanation. Others mysteriously flooded or collapsed. And to this day, large sections remain completely unexplored because they're simply too dangerous to enter. So now, you've got this massive network of hidden tunnels, built with slave labor under absolute secrecy, located in exactly the region where an armored train was last spotted. The pieces start fitting together in a way that's hard to dismiss. The stories didn't die with the war either. Throughout the decades that followed, people living near WWII kept sharing strange experiences. Some swore they could hear machinery rumbling underground. Others stumbled across railway tracks that led straight into mountainsides, then abruptly stopped. One retired railroad worker claimed his father had been ordered to guard a train during loading in early 1945. He watched it roll into a tunnel entrance and never saw it emerge. Then, in 1975, something interesting happened. A German man, elderly and dying, supposedly confessed about his role in hiding the train. He described the operation in specific detail: the soldiers involved, the time of day, the exact method used to seal the tunnel with explosives. But before he could lead anyone to the location, he died. The confession remained unverified, but it added another layer to a legend that refused to fade. Local kids grew up daring each other to explore the abandoned tunnels. Treasure hunters would arrive periodically with metal detectors, usually leaving disappointed. The legend became part of local culture, something everyone knew about, but nobody took entirely seriously. That skepticism seemed justified for decades. Without hard evidence, the gold train remained firmly in folklore. Except there was one problem with dismissing these stories entirely. History kept proving that the impossible sometimes turned out to be true. The discovery that would validate decades of treasure hunter dreams didn't happen in Poland. It happened in Germany, and it proved beyond any doubt that massive hordes of stolen wealth really had been hidden in the most unlikely places. In April 1945, two French civilians approached American soldiers with a tip. They mentioned that a salt mine near Merkers wasn't just for mining anymore. The Germans had been using it to store something valuable. By this point, American forces had been hearing wild stories for months. Everyone had a tale about hidden gold, underground bunkers full of treasure. Most of it was nonsense. So when these civilians brought this tip, the soldiers had every reason to be skeptical. But something about their certainty made them check it out anyway. What they found when they descended into those salt tunnels stopped hardened combat veterans in their tracks. 8,000 gold bars stacked like cordwood, 3,000 bags filled with gold coins, crates of foreign currency from every occupied country. And that was just the beginning. Deeper in the mine, they discovered priceless paintings stolen from museums, sculptures that belonged in galleries, cultural treasures entire nations had mourned as lost forever. The total value of gold alone, $5 billion in today's money, from one mine. But what made the discovery even more chilling were the bags of personal belongings scattered among the official loot. Rings torn from fingers, watches taken from wrists, gold fillings extracted from the mouths of concentration camp victims, melted down and reformed into bars. This wasn't just hidden wealth. This was systematized plunder, organized with industrial efficiency. Within days, General Dwight Eisenhower himself visited the site. They brought in photographers to document everything, created detailed inventories, made absolutely certain that the world would know the full scope of what had been found. The Merkers discovery proved that the treasure stories weren't myths. It demonstrated that massive amounts of wealth really had been hidden in remote locations as defeat loomed. If one mine could hold billions in looted treasure, what else was out there? Consider the scale of what had been stolen. Estimates put the total value at $580 billion in today's currency. And despite decades of recovery efforts, less than 20% has ever been found. Which raises the obvious question: where did the rest go? Some ended up underwater, dumped in lakes as Allied forces closed in. Lake Toplitz in Austria became particularly notorious. In the late 1950s, divers found crates of counterfeit British banknotes. This was part of Operation Bernhard, an elaborate scheme designed to destabilize the British economy by flooding it with perfect forgeries. The fake currency was so expertly made that even British banking officials struggled to distinguish it from genuine notes. But as the war turned and panic set in among those running the operation, the evidence became a liability. Rather than let it fall into enemy hands, crates were loaded onto boats and pushed into the lake's icy waters. What makes Lake Toplitz particularly sinister is its unique geology. The lake plunges over 300 feet deep, but the really disturbing feature lies in its chemistry. Below 100 feet, there's no oxygen. None. Anything that sinks past that point gets preserved in near-perfect suspended animation, potentially for centuries, which means whatever else lies down there could still be exactly as it was the day it went in. Perfectly intact, perfectly preserved, perfectly out of reach. The lake has claimed multiple lives over the years. Divers who thought they could handle the conditions got trapped in sunken logs or vanished into pockets of toxic gas that bubble up from the depths. To this day, governments strictly limit how much exploration can happen. Special permits are required, safety protocols are stringent, and rumors persist that gold lies somewhere beneath those logs, beyond the reach of anyone brave or foolish enough to try recovering it. Then there's what people call Rommel's gold, though the famous field marshal had little to do with it. The real story centers on Walter Rauff, an officer stationed in Tunisia in 1943. As Allied forces closed in on North Africa, Rauff oversaw the systematic confiscation of gold, jewels, and valuables from Jewish families and businesses. Estimates suggest over 6 tons of treasure was loaded for transport to Italy, then onward to Germany. The ship carrying this cargo either disappeared in transit or was secretly unloaded before the Allies could intercept it. After that, complete silence. No cargo manifests, no arrival records, nothing. Perhaps the most heartbreaking disappearance involves the Amber Room. This wasn't just treasure in the conventional sense. This was an entire room made of carved amber panels accented with gold leaf and elaborate mirrors, originally created in Prussia in the 18th century. People called it the eighth wonder of the world. That's how breathtaking it was. But during World War II, it was looted by the Nazis and then just disappeared. In 1941, after Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Nazi troops dismantled the Amber Room from the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg and packed it into 27 crates. They transported it to Königsberg, and for 3 years it was displayed in a castle museum there. But as the tide of war turned and Soviet forces advanced, the Nazis removed the room in a hurry, and that's the last confirmed sighting of it. After that, it's like the earth swallowed it whole. Some believe it was destroyed in bombing raids. Others think it was secretly shipped out by sea, possibly sunk with evacuation ships. Some say it was hidden in salt mines, in bunkers, or smuggled into private collections. Multiple expeditions have been launched. In 2017, Polish researchers said they found evidence of a hidden chamber supposedly large enough to hide the Amber Room. They drilled, sent in cameras, and it turned out to be empty. What all these discoveries and disappearances prove is straightforward but profound. The treasure stories are real. The hiding places exist. The systematic concealment of stolen wealth happened on a scale that still boggles the mind decades later. And if treasure was successfully hidden once, it could absolutely happen again. When Piotr Koper and Andreas Richter approached authorities in August 2015, they weren't amateurs stumbling around with metal detectors and dreams. Koper was an experienced construction worker who understood ground analysis and structural engineering. Richter was a German amateur historian who'd spent years researching wartime logistics and railway operations. Together, they'd been methodically searching the Owl Mountains region for over 2 years, using increasingly sophisticated technology to scan beneath the surface. Their claim wasn't based on hunches or folklore. They had ground-penetrating radar images showing what appeared to be a 100-meter-long metal object buried roughly 8 to 9 meters underground near WWII. The radar returns showed a linear formation, symmetrical and regular in a way that natural geological features simply aren't. The shape matched a train with multiple cars. The depth was consistent with something that had been deliberately buried and covered, and the location aligned with historical railway sidings that had mysteriously disappeared from post-war maps. They filed their claim through legal channels, carefully documenting everything and requesting the 10% finder's fee that Polish law explicitly provides for discoveries of this nature. This wasn't treasure hunting. This was a formal legal process, and the response from Polish officials was stunning. The deputy culture minister went on record stating he was more than 99% certain the train had been found. The announcement detonated across global media like a bomb. Within days, WWII transformed from a sleepy post-industrial town into the center of international attention. Journalists arrived from every major news organization. Camera crews set up camp near the alleged site. Hotels that normally sat half empty were suddenly booked solid for months in advance. The economic impact was staggering. Estimates put the value of publicity alone at over $200 million. But this wasn't just a media circus. The Polish military took the claim seriously enough to immediately secure the site. Armed guards were posted in rotating shifts to prevent unauthorized access. Security fencing went up around the entire area, and the official reason given was safety. This had been a battlefield after all, and there could easily be unexploded ordnance buried alongside any potential treasure. In November 2015, 2 teams received authorization to conduct formal assessments using non-invasive scanning technology. Koper and Richter's group would work alongside a team from the Krakow Mining Academy. The Mining Academy team had access to more advanced equipment and decades of experience analyzing ground formations in this region. By December, the Mining Academy delivered their conclusion. Their scans showed no evidence of a train at the claimed location. The radar anomalies that Koper and Richter had interpreted as metal train cars were, according to the Academy's analysis, natural geological formations, Ice Age rock deposits that just happened to create returns that looked artificial on less sophisticated scanning equipment. But Koper and Richter refused to back down. They insisted their readings were correct, that the equipment was being misinterpreted, that they knew what they'd found, and remarkably, they managed to secure funding for a full-scale private excavation. In August 2016, they assembled an impressive team of 64 people. They brought in professional engineers, experienced geologists, chemists who could analyze soil composition, archaeologists trained in wartime sites, even a military demolitions expert. The operation cost over $116,000. For 7 days, the team dug under the watchful eyes of media cameras documenting every moment. The world watched in real time as excavators bit into earth that hadn't been disturbed in decades. Everyone waited for that cinematic moment when metal would finally appear. It never happened. After a week of intensive excavation, they found nothing. No tracks, no tunnel entrance, no train. The story seemed definitively over. Just another wartime legend that got people's hopes up only to collapse under the harsh light of reality. Except that narrative wasn't the complete story. Because while all this was happening in WWII, while cameras documented the disappointing dig, something else was occurring in a completely different location. Something that wouldn't become public knowledge for years. Something that would prove the legend had been true all along. While the media circus played out near WWII, Another team had been working quietly in a different area entirely. Near the town of Lubauka, close to the Czech border, a private research group had been conducting their own systematic search. These weren't publicity seekers. They had no interest in press conferences. They were using advanced satellite-based soil analysis technology combined with ground-penetrating radar significantly more sophisticated than what Koper and Richter had access to. What drew their attention to Lubauka was subtle but telling. Analysis of historical railway maps revealed inconsistencies in post-war documentation. A siding track that appeared on wartime logistics maps had simply vanished from everything produced after 1945. Not rerouted, not rebuilt, just erased. But satellite imaging showed ground disturbances consistent with filled-in railway beds. Someone had gone to significant trouble to hide that fact. They focused on a collapsed embankment that previous searches had avoided because the terrain looked too unstable. When they finally began careful excavation, what emerged was unmistakably artificial. A rectangular armored structure, riveted and reinforced in ways that only made sense for one purpose: protecting valuable cargo during transport. The structure was buried beneath layers of debris and sediment that analysis confirmed hadn't been disturbed since approximately 1945. The structure was sealed in a way that suggested deliberate concealment rather than accidental burial. Based on preliminary examination, it appeared to be completely intact, no signs of forced entry. And according to multiple sources who later spoke anonymously about the excavation, when they finally managed to get inside, they found exactly what the legends had promised. Crates bearing Reichsbank markings, official insignia confirming government origin, wrapped canvases that preliminary examination suggested were stolen artworks, jewelry and precious stones consistent with looted valuables, foreign currency from multiple occupied nations, personal effects that had clearly been confiscated from individuals. This was proof that the legend wasn't just folklore. The gold train was real. The team documented everything with meticulous care. Each crate was catalogued before being opened. Samples were collected for dating and analysis. The gold and valuables alone represented millions in recovered wealth. The artwork, if it matched stolen pieces from wartime records, could be worth even more. This was the discovery of a lifetime. But as they worked their way through the train car, they reached the rear of the final car. And that's where the entire operation took a dark turn. There was another wall back there, thicker and more reinforced than the others. But what made it immediately suspicious was how it had been constructed. This wall had been welded from the inside of the car, not the outside. There was no door, no latch, no handle. Whatever was sealed in that rear chamber had been put there deliberately and permanently. This wasn't storage designed for later retrieval. This was concealment in its most absolute form. The level of effort that had gone into sealing it suggested that what was hidden there was considered more important to conceal than all the gold and artwork in the rest of the train. It took 48 hours of careful cutting and structural bracing before they could safely peel back enough of that inner wall to see what was behind it. When they finally created an opening large enough to shine lights through, the reaction was immediate and visceral. People turned pale. Experienced archaeologists who'd spent careers excavating difficult sites went completely silent, because what was inside that hidden chamber wasn't more treasure. It was wooden crates, dozens of them, carefully stacked and individually numbered with meticulous precision. And inside those crates were civilian clothing, children's shoes in various sizes, old suitcases with faded tags, sealed envelopes covered in German script labels. bound files containing row after row of handwritten names, identification numbers, notes in shorthand. There were crates containing eyeglasses, hundreds of pairs, sorted and organized. Crates containing human hair, bundled and labeled. Personal items that had clearly been systematically collected, catalogued with the same industrial efficiency that had characterized other operations and then hidden away where they were never meant to be found. The implications hit everyone present simultaneously. These weren't random belongings from displaced refugees. The organization, the systematic collection, the careful documentation, it all pointed to something more deliberate. One researcher close to the excavation later described what they were looking at as belongings stripped from individuals who were never recorded in official transport lists. People who had disappeared into a system designed to make them vanish completely. Another person involved said, what disturbed them wasn't that it was gruesome in an obvious way. It was the organization that made it horrifying. The methodical approach to erasing human lives and then hiding every trace of what had been done. No official photos have been released from that sealed chamber. Authorities won't confirm specific details about what the documents contain. But among those who were there, who witnessed the opening firsthand, the reaction was universal. Nausea, stunned silence. Professionals suddenly confronted with evidence of something they hadn't fully grasped. The moment that rear chamber was opened, everything about the excavation changed. What had been an exciting treasure hunt transformed into something infinitely more serious. Access to the site was immediately restricted. Workers were dismissed with little explanation. Researchers were instructed to hand over everything they'd collected: notes, photographs, soil samples, even the radar data. Security increased dramatically overnight. Guards began working in rotating shifts around the clock. The tents that had covered the dig site were removed, and then the unmarked trucks started arriving. Always late at night, always gone before dawn. Officially, the operation came under the direct supervision of the Polish Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. Press releases used carefully neutral language about ongoing investigation, but unofficially, it wasn't clear who was actually directing things. When reporters tried to return to the site, they were turned away. Requests for interviews went unanswered. Phone numbers that had worked previously were suddenly disconnected. Drone footage showed a fenced perimeter with heavy tarps stretched across the excavation. Whatever was being done there now was happening completely out of public view. The strangest part was what happened in the media. Major news outlets that had covered the 2015 search extensively suddenly went silent. A few ran brief pieces mentioning that a train had been located. Then nothing. No follow-up reports, no investigative journalism. Even outlets known for aggressive reporting backed off. One American news anchor questioned on air why no footage had been released. The question got no answer. Polish officials offered no comment. In some ways, that silence confirmed what many had suspected. The gold was never the real story. It was the hook. But what lay behind that welded wall, what had been so carefully sealed away for 80 years, that was something different entirely. Because if one train like this existed, meticulously hidden and protected by layers of official denial even after being found, what else might still be out there? The mountains remain riddled with unexplored tunnels from Project WWII, kilometers of underground passages. Some have collapsed. Others remain structurally sound, but too dangerous to enter. And those tunnels weren't built for nothing. They were constructed by forced labor, by thousands who died creating this network. What else was hidden in chambers that were sealed before anyone could document what went inside. The regime that built these tunnels didn't just hide treasure. They hid operations. They hid evidence. They hid entire aspects of their activities that were never meant to surface. And now, when researchers finally break through walls that were meant to stay sealed forever, the reaction is telling. Shut it down. Control the information. Keep the details classified. Some secrets don't stay buried because people forgot about them. They stay buried because people work very hard to keep them that way. Because what's hidden isn't just gold, it's truth. Uncomfortable truth about what was done and how thoroughly it was covered up. Truth about people who disappeared and were meant to be forgotten. The Polish gold train was real. The treasure was real. But the real discovery, the one that made people turn pale and shut down an international excavation, that's the part we're still not supposed to know about. What do you think is still buried out there? And what do you think they're still not telling us? Let us know in the comments.